or on their app.
I'm Tori Bedford. Tonight on Greater Boston, parents are outraged and the district attorney is investigating after reports of racist bullying at a Western Mass high school. How can the town of Southwick move forward from here? Plus, we'll hear from Boston's own Tuskegee Airman Enoch Woodhouse II. Then, is free tuition the solution to years of falling enrollment at community colleges? We'll look at Governor Healey's plans and what it could mean for students. In a majority white school in the town of Southwick, 10 high school students held a mock slave auction on Snapchat, bidding on their black classmates. Just 2 days later, most of them were back in school alongside the students they had just dehumanized. The racist post and the school's response has sparked backlash, with the local chapter of the NAACP filing a formal complaint to the state, citing, quote, the district's failure to properly handle racial harassment and bullying against its black students. To discuss where the town can go from here, I'm joined by the president of the Greater Springfield NAACP, Bishop Talbert Swan II, former Lowell School Committee member Stacey Thompson, and Allyson Lopez, a mother of one of the victims. Allyson, I want to start with you. How's your daughter is 13 years old. How is she doing? What has this experience been like for her? Is she okay?
Oh, it's been traumatizing for sure, right? When this first started, it was very hard for us to just wrap our heads around it. I did not know of the incident immediately, this specific incident immediately, but I found out about it a couple hours after she left the house that morning to attend school, when I received a phone call, and she was really devastated and she was upset. She woke up that morning crying, and I didn't know why. I couldn't figure out what was actually happening at the moment until a couple hours later is when she disclosed what she found out.
And has this been difficult? You spoke at a committee meeting earlier this month, and you had called for action, and you had said that you were the one who kind of fields questions from her about why this happened. Mm-hmm. How has she been kind of in the aftermath of this?
Very silent, very closed off. Don't want to talk about it. Don't want to really hear about it. If you bring it up, it's a difficult conversation to have. So we have the conversation when she feels comfortable enough to talk about it. So it's still hard today. She goes to school every day, and she still has to see these students amongst her. So it's hard. When she comes home in the afternoon, how was your day? I might get, it was okay. And that's as far as we go.
And you'd called for some action during that meeting.
Yes.
Have you seen any kind of response from the school? What has that been like? What have they been doing to ameliorate this?
No response. I mean, the school had a one-day assembly for a couple hours, maybe a half an hour per grade of assembly, and that's as far as it went. We have not heard anything else. We have not heard if there's any trainings happening, any sort of steps to make sure that these students don't continue to do what they have done. So there's really no action. I've gotten emails and information from several parents after this incident talking about their students. As of today, I received a message from another parent saying, currently she's struggling. So there is no action.
And unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. There was a 2022 article from The Conversation about other mock slave auctions held in high schools across the country. There was one in Goldston, North Carolina in March 2022. There was one in Yuba City, California, Newburgh, Oregon, Barrington, Illinois. There have been several of these. Stacey, I want to ask you, how did we get here? What do you make of this strange and shocking trend?
I wish I could count it as one specific thing. I think we've, arrived here because there is a feeling that people can do anything. I would chalk it up to one person. I think we know who that one person is that kind of has mobilized hate and weaponized it in a way that it made it attractive to some people. And it's the lack of education. There's a real pushback across the country. You've seen it really permeate in Florida and Texas, but in other parts of the country, there's a real desire for erasure of education and what really has happened in this country. The fact that anyone would think, to hold a slave auction would be permissible, and that it would even enter someone's mind, tells you there is a real lack of education of what has happened and how that would be a very painful reminder of an experience that many of us have known about in our ancestry.
And Stacey, of course, you're referencing, legislation in states like Florida where they have been very restrictive about teaching African American history, about American history, and the way that the slave trade has kind of fallen into that. Bishop Swan, the work of the NAACP is to highlight the truth and work on equity and kind of move forward, leveling the playing field. How do you think that this school and this district can move forward? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the first thing that has to happen is there has to be a level of honesty in the district. They have to admit where they have come short. In order to fix something, you've got to face it. And to deny that there's a problem that exists means they are not credible when giving lip service to mitigating the particular issue. A student slave auction illustrates the existence of a hidden culture of domination and subjugation, white supremacy and racism that exists in U.S. schools across the nation. And this is because it is passed down from generation to generation. So oftentimes we hear about a post-racial society. We hear about a society that is thinking less and less about race as the younger generations come along. But when you hear about 12 and 13 and 15-year-old young white kids that have this mentality, it kind of debunks that whole notion that the problem of racial discrimination is dying down with the current generation. It was the late, great W.E.B. Du Bois who said over 100 years ago that the problem of the 20th century was the problem of the color line. And I submit to you that fast forward a century later, and that statement is just as true today as it was then.
Stacey, what do you think? I mean, I think in some ways, maybe the most optimistic way of looking at this would be to use it as an opportunity, right? I know in a number of districts across the state, they've implemented curriculum from the 1619 Project. There have been so many new ways to approach the teaching of race, the teaching of the history of slavery, the teaching of American history in a way that incorporates the reality of the disparities between races. What do you think? I mean, how could this be used as a way to move forward? What would you do if you were in charge of this district?
First of all, and I have to, echo what the bishop just said. I think that it's important for there to be a level of honesty in trying to implement anything. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of times when you have DEI as the backing of things, people like the D part of it, the diversity, which just means many, right? They'll take that part. But when you get into the equity and then the inclusion portion of it, that's where people kind of, that's where there's a hard stop. I think that, what has to happen is there has to be an understanding that we as a Black people are more than just slavery. We as a Black people have literally built this country and the contributions are endless. So there has to be an acknowledgement of that. There has to be an ownership of that. But the biggest thing for me is that it can't be something that is done as a checkbox. And quite frankly, when all these organizations found it to be an attractive thing to do DEI, DEIB, whatever acronym people may be using, it became checkbox politics for them. Mm-hmm. Everything with race or with Black people and including them in a history that we've already owned, it needs to be intentional, right? So it can't just be something that's done to make someone feel better about a history that people don't want to own. The realities of it is we are a powerful people and we've done lots of things in this country, and to just kind of put it as, this thing that, just should be done to appease someone is also insulting to me. One of the things that I was doing as a member of the school committee is I was working on lots of legislation, whether it be local or more broad. And there are legislative acts, bills that are still coming down the pipeline. But again, things need to be intentional and not because there's a political a time for people to vote or something that seems attractive at the moment. The George Floyd moment for a lot of people was a wave of change, and now that wave has passed, and people are hoping that all of this dies down. And quite frankly, that is part of the problem.
Right. You're referencing, I think, these two bills that have been kind of stalled in committee, an act relative to anti-racism and equity in education, and that would change a lot of the curriculum around these issues.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. I mean, it would change a lot. But in addition to that, we have to be considering, are you hiring teachers that reflect the student population? I mean, I'm in Lowell. The majority of our student population, 75% of our students are students of color. And you would be hard pressed to maybe have 15 to 20% of the teachers, of the staff, of the people that are feeding into and nurturing our young people that represent them or look like them. So that in itself is another issue. You're trying to get work done. That's great. You're trying to get things implemented. That's great. But again, for me, the big word is intentionality. Are you doing it as, an aside? Is it something that you're doing as, something you think about later? Or is it something that you're integrating in the ways that we conduct business? Because business as usual is not working. We've seen it. It's not working. And the cries for change are going to just get louder.
I think it's also important to note that work should not fall on the students, and the impact on the students cannot be, overstated. I just don't want Allyson's daughter to have to feel like it is now on her to teach her fellow students. I want to hear from, we have a clip of this student, Asher Rose, who described what it felt like. There was a school assembly for students to express their concerns. February 26th, this happened during Black History Month. Here's Asher Rose.
Here are a few words my peers and I would use to describe the less than 30 minutes we sat in that room. Immature, unprofessional, disturbing, a political PR stunt, defensive, unaccountability, anger, confusion, and exactly what we expected to hear.
Allyson, what would you like to see immediate action coming out of this?
Oh my goodness. Education is the first thing, right? As you just said, that you don't want my daughter to feel as though she's responsible to educate the students. That was the first thing she tried doing the first time this happened to her. She made the decision to say, I would like to have a conversation with the first student who called her out of her name to educate him to understand why it was inappropriate. So she already started that. She already felt that she needed to do that because no one else was doing that for her. So I think education is important. I think admitting that there's a problem. That district has not admit yet there is a problem. Up to today, they have not admit there is a problem. They feel it's a PR stunt, let's check a box and let's move on. They have been here a year ago or 2 years ago, 2022, when they had the same issue and they put the blackface in the urinal and the other students was urinating on the face, right? So they checked the box then. They put the box away, and now here we are again 2 years later.
Yeah, so start with some
accountability, accepting there's a problem, working on it. I just don't understand why it's not embedded in their curriculum.
Right.
I just don't understand why it's not embedded in their curriculum.
Allyson Lopez, Stacey Thompson, and Bishop Talbert Swan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, Enoch Woodhouse was still a student at English High School in Boston. He joined the military as soon as he graduated and eventually the Tuskegee Airmen, the U.S. military's first black fighter pilot wing. Woodhouse recently shared the deep patriotism and racism he experienced as part of the history-making unit with GBH News.
I always like to say about me, got the real deal. My name is Enoch Woodhouse II. I'm 97 years old.
And one of the last surviving members of the Tuskegee Airmen, the U.S. military's first group of black aviators and support staff. Woodhouse's image commands a mural at Boston's Logan Airport. The E on his jacket is for Boston's English High. He was a student there when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor.
December 7th, 1941, we were on our way to church. My mother said, "Boys, America is at war. I want you to serve your country." Can you imagine a black woman saying that? All she had in the world were her two boys, and the pictures we grew up with was our people being lynched. But anyway, we did. I had a diploma literally in hand. This is what we did. This is why they called us the greatest generation, because everybody served.
But the men who would become the Tuskegee Airmen faced an additional enemy, racism. For Woodhouse, it began before he reported for duty.
We took the train from South Station to St. Louis. I was the only person of color with the group. So we got to St. Louis with our duffel bags and everything, and the conductor comes up and he shouts, "Get off the train." We all were still joking because nothing but a bunch of young kids on the train in uniform going to serve. So he came up to me and not too gently tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I said get off the train." 17 years old. $8 in my pocket in an empty train station. This porter comes up to me, I'll never forget him. He says, "Son, what are you here for? Your train doesn't come from another 7 hours." And he said, "Incidentally, have you been south before?" I said, "Yeah, I've been to New York." He said, "No, I didn't mean that." He said, "The real South. We don't ride certain trains." So my train came along, 7 or 8 hours left, and I reported to my first sergeant, and you know how he greeted me. Dirty, smelly uniform, 8 hours late. That was my first day in the military. All blacks, every black, no matter what your education, no matter what, you were assigned to certain bases and you were assigned to certain squadrons. Duties of Squadron F, housekeeping, KP, road repair, snow removal. Once in a while, we filled in guarding prisoners at Camp Utah, German prisoners of war. And incidentally, the German prisoners of war ate better than we did because of international protocols. Now, how did I escape? The best job at that time for a person, I can't say a person of color or a black person, because that's all we had in our unit. That's all I saw, black people. So I talked myself into getting a job as a driver in the motor pool. That was a top job.
Woodhouse was recommended for officer training.
I was commissioned one of the youngest at 19. Lockburn, Ohio was the third base that would accept 2,000 or 3,000 black airmen. I was assigned to be paymaster, finance officer. People ask me, how does it feel in an all-black unit with just nothing but black people like yourself? I said, I felt fine, because I was with the finest men I've known in life, no matter what their race. We had Harry Stewart. He shot down 3 planes in around 2 minutes. That was never publicized. The real top gun in the Air Force was a black guy. The team was Harry Stewart, James Harvey, I'll see him, Trable Alexander, he was alternate, and Alva N. Temple. The reason I know every guy by their middle initial, you know how you get paid. You sign last name, first name, middle initial. I knew everybody. Oh, no, they knew me.
Between 15 and 16,000 people served with the Tuskegee Airmen. Less than 2 dozen are still alive.
Oh, my God. See, we all meet in a phone booth. You know, I was the youngest at 19, what we call DOTAs, documented original Tuskegee Airmen, DOTAs. Not many of us left.
Have you ever reflected on that? Just there's so few remaining?
Well, I don't go by the numbers. I go by the
Finally tonight, when Massachusetts launched a program to make community college free for students 25 and older, enrollment at these colleges jumped for the first time in nearly a decade. But enrollment is still well below pre-pandemic levels. And now Governor Maura Healey's administration is looking to make community college free for all state residents. GBH News higher education managing editor and correspondent Kirk Carapezza has been following the story. He joins me now along with Rebecca Beaucher, who was able to go back to college last fall thanks to the program. Thank you both so much for being here. Rebecca, congratulations. I mean, how did that feel? Can you talk a little bit about your journey? You took some time off, couple decades. You had been enrolled in a community college program. What's this been like for you?
It's been life-changing. I've gained so much confidence since going back to school. When I first learned about the program last March, I was following the budget along, waiting for it to be signed. When it was finally signed in August, I burst into tears. I contacted my husband. I said, "This is it. I'm finally going to finish what I started." And I enrolled the very next day with Northern Essex Community College. Everyone there was really excited. They were notified at the same time I was, so I think we were trying to navigate the process together, but everyone was exceptional and made me feel very comfortable in the process. For the first class that I enrolled, I wanted to pick one that I knew I would enjoy, that I wouldn't be defeated with. So I love to write. I took English, and that was probably a really good decision for me because it lit that fire under me to really feel like, yes, I'm going to lock in and I'm going to finish my degree this time.
And you had been working on your degree, but you had a job and you're a mom. And I think for so many women, that's a phenomenon that happens, in addition to the extreme cost of higher education, right?
Yes.
Where you just felt like it was a little too much at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was lucky enough. My son had graduated high school, so I did have that space where he had flown the nest, and I could focus on me. So for me, that timing really worked out. Instead of work-life balance, though, now it is work-life school balance. I am taking one class at a time. I'm doing that right now because that's what I feel comfortable with, and that's what makes me feel not so overwhelmed. Because I know as soon as I feel overwhelmed, I may look for an out, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and you're on a track now where you'll be in this community college, you'll get your associates, and then you'll sort of transition into a 4-year program and go from there. We talked a little bit, you want to do business stuff, and I think in Kirk's story, you had said that you want to I think on your gravestone to say like Dr. Beaucher. So
yes.
Beaucher. Yeah. Yes. That's so exciting.
No matter what the degree is in.
Yes.
I want to be doctor. Yes.
That's so exciting. So we talked a little about this previously. There's been, there's been a bunch of initiatives legislatively to make community college free for everyone. At the same time, like we've seen an uptick here in Massachusetts, but why do you think that community college enrollment has gone down in general?
Overall.
Yeah.
Right, so it's up 8%, largely due to this new free community college program here in the state, but community colleges were hit hardest during the pandemic, and that's because thousands of students thought that classes could only be held in person, and those that could only be held in person were canceled. So think programs like nursing or culinary programs. So enrollment is down 25% since before the pandemic, and it's down 40% here since 2014. And those swings are much more dramatic than when you look at national rates. But enrollment, it's also important to keep in mind that enrollment at community colleges is cyclical. So when the economy is up, community college enrollment tends to go down. And this is kind of the big play for Massachusetts, is dangling this program out there and see if more people like Rebecca will take them up on it, because it's a huge market. There's 40 million people in this country who have some college but no degree, right? And they've put the time in, they have some credits, but they have no degree or certificate to show for it. So this is a big play for these adult students, and as you mentioned, Governor Healey and other leaders would love to make this free for all residents if taxpayers can afford it.
I imagine that it would also ultimately be a boon to the economy as well. Is that part of the thinking in moving this forward? What is the reasoning for? Right.
I mean, part of it's a response to that enrollment crisis that we just mentioned. Since before the pandemic, there's 1 million fewer college students who, haven't evaporated, but they've left college, right? But it's also a response to the workforce demands, right? You have employers who are saying, look, we need more people with degrees and certificates. We're in a state that has the highest percentage of workers with 4-year degrees. But the number of high school graduates that pool is shrinking. It peaked in 2001, and now we're facing this demographic cliff that's coming in 2026, because it's 18 years after 2008 during the Great Recession, when a lot of American families decided to stop having kids, and they never started again. So it's a cliff. There's no rebound coming. So we have the same number of schools competing for the same number of students, or for a shrinking pool of students. But thanks again to this program, the 15 community colleges here in Massachusetts all saw at least a slight uptick in the number of students.
And this program, I think in your reporting, you said that 2/3 of states across the nation are now offering some form of free community college. Right. I think the most robust research we've seen is out of Tennessee, where only 1 in 5 adults who enrolled in their program have actually graduated. Enrollment, and then there's also graduation.
Right, so there's inputs and there's outcomes, right? So the inputs, it worked. When Tennessee did this, Tennessee's a Republican-led state. This is more than 10 years ago, so we have some research to see whether it worked. And like Massachusetts, in that first year, we saw a slight an uptick. It went up 5%, but then over time, it slowly decreased. And since the pandemic, enrollment, even in Tennessee where it's free, has gone down. But it doesn't necessarily mean that students graduate, because, as Rebecca knows, there's a lot of other factors involved other than just tuition, right? Life gets in the way. You have a job. There's opportunity cost. We have some states now, like Vermont, California, that are trying these pilot programs where they're actually paying students to go to college, specifically in fields where they know they need workers, so things like early childcare. Vermont did that during the pandemic. But yeah, economists say that community colleges, if this is going to work, they need to improve their product, right? And they need to provide more guidance, 24/7 guidance. They need to offer the programs, when students and parents can actually go to the classes, not between 10 and 1 on Tuesdays and Thursdays when the professors want to teach.
Rebecca, we have about 30 seconds left, but what do you, as somebody who's in this, what do you think that students need to feel supported, to be able to make it to graduation?
I'd say just reach out to community colleges. They are ready with open arms. Start with an easy class, get your feet wet again, and just don't lose that traction. Because the only thing you're going to lose is that feeling you get that you didn't finish.
Great. Kirk Carapezza, Rebecca Beaucher, thank you both so much for being here. That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching. I'm Tori Bedford. Good night.
Watch you every